So we're going to talk right now about business and social customs. And this is probably one of my favorite areas because as you guys have been listening and participating in this class, um, it's there's so much variety in the world and there's just so many ways of doing things. And um, my background in having been raised with two cultures and then learning a third and learning a fourth culture through the years and really immersing myself in each of those cultures, it's really made me curious as to how people do things and what is right and proper in each culture. So this is going to be a quick overview, but I'm also going to point out some resources that I found on the internet that might be helpful to you. So um, let's see, business and social customs. So verbal expressions. One of the most important connecting elements in a culture is verbal, is speaking the same language. So much is communicated through paralanguage along with the local spoken language that it's amazing how much you can understand without speaking the same language. When I was in college, I spent a year in France, and I had made friends with a woman from Greece, an older woman, much, I don't know, at least 25 years older than me. And she invited me to go to Greece to visit and, visit Athens and surrounding areas and spend some time with her. So I hopped on a train and headed down to Greece. And on the trip back, um, I was in one of those little compartments with five other people, and there was a military guy. Now, back then, I'm going to date myself, we went through Yugoslavia, and in back then Yugoslavia, right? So I had a 6-hour train ride from one end to the other of Yugoslavia. And this young soldier came into our compartment and he was going the entire length. And so we spent 6 hours talking without having one word in common. So at first there was a lady who was translating for us, but she wanted to sleep, so that became awkward. And he was speaking in Yugoslavian and I was speaking at first in English, but there were other people in the cabin who spoke English. So I switched to Portuguese so that no one understood what I was saying. And so we have this conversation. And so what do you talk about, right, when you don't speak the same language? In that 6-hour time frame, and I know what you guys are thinking, okay, yes, he was flirting with me. No, I didn't care. And 6 hours later, he got off the train and I never saw him or heard from him again. Never gave him personal information, just a conversation. Okay, so what did we do? We taught each other how to count. Okay, so I learned to count in Yugoslavian, he learned to count in Portuguese. Then we talked about brothers, sisters, extended family, how big is your family? I have no idea how we figured that out, but we ended up saying everybody's names and learning to say each other's, family members' names. We did days of the week, we did months. I know, boring conversations, right? But then we just talked about stuff. And eventually he pulled out a magazine and taught me to read in Yugoslavian. So I learned to read and pronounce everything semi correctly. And, you know, I'm like reading this magazine out loud and understanding a word here and there. So, um, some of the words that I remember to this day: weekendski, weekend, easy enough, right? Um, Actually, I only remember two words. The other word was romantica. And every time he said that, I said no. Um, anyway, so language is very, very important. And yet, if you make an effort, a lot is forgiven. So learn some greetings in the local language, learn what is the appropriate protocol. Um, I talked about this before about, you know, what is the chit chat? Do you talk about family? Do you not talk about family, health, jobs? You know, and your book has a list of some countries, some do's and don'ts in those countries. Um, how quickly do you get to the point when you're talking, doing business, and what are the conversational patterns? And I told you guys how in the middle of a conversation in Fulani, we go back to, how is your family? Is your family well? Um, so learn those verbal expressions and patterns. So now business and social customs. These are some big categories that you should become aware of. They will serve you well if you understand the culture where you are a guest, what these things are. And I touched on some of them in chapter 8. So male-female relationships in the workplace. I talked yesterday when I was recording chapter 8, I talked about how if women are not accepted as equals in the workplace, that women need to be a lot more careful. In an individualistic Western mindset, that is very offensive. And I wanted to come back to that point because I was thinking about this last night and how some of you may react to hearing that, right? So here's the point I want to make. If you want the negotiation for your company to go well, if you want your company and your boss to be respected, if you want, just like I talked about, I wanted my husband to be respected, therefore I did whatever I needed to in the Fulani culture. So we may not live out exactly who we are when we're a guest in another country. And I just wanted to make the point that it's okay. You're not going against an ethical standard necessarily. And I'm not saying it's easy, okay? I lived in West Africa for 7 years, never once put on a pair of shorts or pair of pants. And let me tell you, it was hot and we had no air conditioning. But I adjusted. I always wore a head covering when I left the house. And I discovered that in the heat of the day, having something covering my head actually cooled me off. So it wasn't all bad, even though I hate stuff on my head. Can't stand hats, any kind of hats, can't stand them. But I adjusted. The friendships that I have very, very good friendships in West Africa. I can honestly say that not a single one of them understand me for who I am. And they might be very surprised if they saw me today in America, living an American lifestyle. Um, but it was okay. I connected with them and their culture in their way, and I learned a ton about their culture and about their way of life, and eventually gained enough trust that Muslim men entrusted their wives to come over to my house and learn to cook and learn to do crafts and talk about life, talk about educating their children and how to discipline their children, how to raise up respectable children was what we talked about. And their husbands entrusted me with imparting knowledge to them and educating them on stuff. And that would have never happened if I had tried to just be my own culture. Okay, moving on. Humor in business. So we touched on this before. Be very careful with humor. Humor doesn't even really have a place in our own culture in business, at least in think about your vice presidents. The respectable people, are they going around telling jokes? Now, having said that, I love a good joke. And this summer, my mother has filled me up with jokes. So I took a bunch of pictures of jokes at her house. So let me try one on you guys. Probably not gonna make sense to everybody, but let me see if I can find something here real quick. I don't know, being that we have so many cultures in our classroom, I wonder if people are going to even understand it. Okay, this one. I have this weird talent where I can identify what's inside a wrapped present. You know what it is? It's a gift. Okay, they're very corny. Why do bees stay in their hives during winter? Swarm. Okay, so if English is your second language, these may not make any sense, right? So these are like corny little jokes, okay, play on words or whatever. But here's the point. If English is your second language, did you really connect with it? If someone in French tells me a joke in French, I may not catch on to it, especially if it's a play on words. Yes, I'm fluent in the language, but it's not like it's my first language. And I don't know, you know. Brazilian humor I get. French humor seems like almost rude sometimes. I don't know, but it isn't. It's a style. Okay, so humor in business, be very careful with it. How about superstitions and taboos? So superstitions are beliefs that don't quite match the scientific world. Okay, it's inconsistent with the known laws of science. But societies will hold that very seriously. So one superstition that I grew up with in Brazil, and a lot of countries have different superstitions around food. Okay, so in Brazil, we were told when we were little that if we ate pineapple and then drank milk, it would curdle in our stomach and we would die. Okay. Now, it probably would curdle in our stomach and we might have a stomach ache, but it's not going to be something that kills us, right? But because there was this saying, none of us touched it. If we had pineapple, we had pineapple, and we never mixed it with even cheese or milk or yogurt, no dairy products, because it was going to be very detrimental to our health. And then taboos. So taboos are practices in a culture, in a society, that you do or you don't. And taboos are those things that you absolutely don't do. Um, a taboo that I can think of in Arab countries is showing the sole of your feet, showing the bottom of your shoes. Very inappropriate. Um, so, um, I mean, it could be as simple as you don't do an assignment in red ink. Okay. There's no consequence, really. Your professors may not like it, but why? What does it matter, right? So anyway, so superstitions and taboos, you want to know what some of those major things are so that you don't upset your host. Dress and appearance, we talked about that in the previous chapter. The most important thing here is that dress and appearance will either give you credibility or destroy your credibility. So you want to understand what the expectations are ahead of time. Holidays and holy days. So what are the practices? What are the norms? If you're traveling, you want to be aware of holidays. Are you going to be there over a holiday and it's going to mess up your time? Look those things up and even ask them if there are going to be any holidays while you are over there. And then study up on them a little bit and understand what those could be. Okay. So you go to Brazil and you're there right around Ash Wednesday. Just know you're going to get no business done because the Brazilian Carnival is 5 days. Everybody is up all hours of the night. Businesses may say that they're open, but it's very sporadic. People are sleeping in the morning because they've been out half of the night. And so you're not going to get much done. So you want to know what those are. Go to China and you happen to be there over the Chinese New Year. You're going to enjoy an amazing festivity, but don't expect to get work done during the holiday. Okay. So I don't know. Look up holidays for the country that you are going to and make sure. So I mentioned holidays. Find out about elections as well, because you don't want to be in a country trying to negotiate in the middle of elections. If it's a Western country like the US, where you go to the polls and you go home and nobody really cares beyond that, we do care, but it's very different than when we were in Guinea and there was always the fear of a coup. The military was out in force. People were demonstrating and you didn't want to get caught in a mob. So anyway, so you want to know holidays and any big political things going on. Office customs and practices. So you want to know what the traditions are in the company. I mean, things like, what do people wear to work? What time do they start? How late do they work? Know that if you're in Japan, you're starting very early and you're going out to dinner late. So your days may start at 7 a.m. and end at 11 or midnight, and you will be expected to participate in all of that throughout the day. Um, know what customary demeanor or behavior is. So, demeanor is the person's deportment or conduct. So, um, going up and down stairs, for example, do you go down the right side and come up on the other, are you on the right side, are you on the left side? um, if you are a smoker, how acceptable is it to ask for a smoke break? I mean, that may not affect any of us in this class, but it's very much a culture. And I taught at a school that I would say a good 40% of our students and probably 60% of our faculty were heavy smokers. And we had the nicest places on campus were the designated smoking areas. And if you were not a smoker, you were like excluded from the best of the environments and the best of the conversations. Um, so if you travel to countries where smoking is a lot more prevalent than in the US, know that that's going to be important. If you were a smoker and you're going to a company where, you don't know, you probably need to be wearing a patch and doing whatever so that you don't have those cravings during the day. And I don't know what I'm talking about, by the way. But just be aware that that is something that is huge in a work environment in countries where smoking is more prevalent. Um, let's see. Go to a soccer ball game. Don't block people's view, right? You don't want to stand up and block people. They will insult you. Um, And then if you're taking public transportation, what are the customs? What do you pay? How do you tip? Um, Again, what are the practices around that? Bribery. So bribery is giving or promising something. Most of the time it's money to influence a person's actions. Okay. And in the US, we have very strict rules on bribery. In other countries, you may not get anything done unless you are paying something to someone. And so understanding what the practices are and being very conservative with any kind of payout is very important. Um, and bribery is not something that you just do or don't do. A lot of countries do not consider bribery. They have different names for what all Americans would call bribery. They have different categories and different names. So in Indonesia, by the way, bribery is said to save time and effort when you're dealing with government officials. So if time is of the essence, you will be paying out to get work done. And yes, the US has the most strict rules and regulations about bribery in the world. If you are a foreigner and you offer a bribe to an American, it is extremely offensive. So we need to be aware of that. And then finally, special foods and consumption taboos. So combinations of food, what's allowed, what isn't allowed. Um, let's see. Um, So when you are eating, especially if you have food restrictions or preferences, it's really tricky to know when um, you ask and say, I don't eat that, and when you eat it. Um, so if you have food restrictions and you're not going to eat whatever is put in front of you, you need to find that out and know how to deal with that ahead of time. And you need to be talking to people who are in the business environment. Like, you don't want to ask um, someone who has no business experience to guide you through this, okay? When I was 19 years old, I was asked to translate in the Amazon for a group of dentists and doctors. And I headed up this trip at 19 years old and had never been to the Amazon. Go figure, right? They just threw me in and said, you speak Portuguese, you deal with it. And I was traveling with several couples and a family. And the family had two children who were my age, a little older than me, but we were all college students. So 3 college students, and then everybody else was our parents' age or older. Dentists, doctors, nurses, dental hygienists, etc. And the group we were 14 people. Okay. So we got on a public boat. It was a 3-tier boat. And the top tier of the boat was open air. There was a cantina where we could buy snacks through the day, and we could buy hot juice because the ice ran out really fast. And it was open, so we could be out there in the sunshine and see all around us. The main floor, well, the second tier, because we came in on the first tier. So the second tier was where we slept and where we ate. So it was full of tables, and then at night we would hang all of our hammocks. And then the tier where we walked in was where animals were and the poor who didn't pay a bigger fare. And it was right above the engine room, so it was very loud and noisy and stuff. And they ate at their level. Okay. So we were supposed to be on this boat for 12 hours, and then we were supposed to get off the boat and join an Adventist medical boat, and they were going to take us to villages for the next 10 days. And we were going to go village to village and provide medical and dental consultations. So when we arrived at this little tiny village, it had a floating dock for the port, and a grouping of 60, maybe 40 to 60 huts, no stores, nothing. The people there informed us that the boat had left the day before the medical launch we were supposed to be on, and they were not coming back for a week. They had gotten the dates mixed up and were expecting us in a week. And so here we were in the middle of nowhere, and there's no boat to turn around and come back. This boat we were on was going to go all the way upriver for 3 days, turn around and come back. And so he had a 4-day route, which means 3.5 days. So he went up and down the river every 7 days. Okay. So if he left at midnight on Saturday night, he would be back maybe around 7 or 8 p.m. the next Saturday. So anyway, something like that. And so we were stuck. So here I am, 19 years old, had to make the decision with these doctors, what do we do? And someone on the boat told us that if we stayed on the boat another 2 days, not to the end of the line, but close to it, if we stayed on the boat, there was an Adventist church, and it was the only place along the way that had a telephone, that had a bank, that had stores, and they were like, you need to go there. So we stayed on the boat. We went all the way there. We arrived there Sabbath afternoon after church was over. We asked around and found the church. From the church, we talked to neighbors. They walked us to the head elder's house. We told the head elder what the issues were. And this whole negotiation starts, okay? So he took us to the mayor and to the banker. It like almost sounds like a joke, right? The mayor, and then he took us to the priest. And the priest found a house for us to sleep in. The mayor found us a empty house to set up as a clinic. The priest also announced it in church, and he owned a radio station, so he announced it on the radio that we were going to be there for a week. And then the banker lent us money because we had spent all the cash we had just getting there, because we weren't going to need any money. The medical launch was going to take care of us. Okay. So anyway, by late afternoon, we have a new project set up. Denny Grady, by the way, Joe, was on that trip, and he was with a different group in another part of the world. He was like a junior in college at the time. And so nobody knew that we were not with the medical team. Nobody from our planners, right? That we were way off course. It was insane. So the phones were down. We had to send a telegram to the mission. We asked them to wire money to pay back the banker. And we spent an amazing week, okay? Even though getting there was tough, and there were other things that happened, okay, on that trip that were just nightmarish. I was held at gunpoint that night. 19 years old, I was threatened. It was very, very scary. So we had a tremendous week. The night before we were leaving, which was Friday night, Sabbath, we were going to church, and then we were getting on the same boat Sabbath afternoon and heading back to the capital. The banker, the mayor, and the priest show up at this house that we had been staying at, and they have this huge platter with lettuce, okay, and tomato slices all around it, and then little chunks of meat. I would say like 2.5 by 2.5 inches, maybe 5 centimeters square, and then maybe about that thick. These little steaks, okay, white meat. And although killing a crocodile is illegal, they had gone out and killed one or sent someone, and their wives had prepared this meat for us. Now think about it, okay? All of us are vegetarian. All of us are Adventist, which means we don't eat crocodile, alligator. And our hosts, who had taken such good care of us, are offering us meat, and a meat that we would never eat. Okay? So all these older people, right? These doctors, nurses, dentists, they all look at me and they're like talking between their teeth, going, "So what do we do, Kim? We don't want to eat this stuff." And I looked at those people and I said, "You are not going to dishonor these people and insult them and not eat what they put in front of you. I don't care. You're eating crocodile today." And I was a vegetarian who had never eaten one piece of meat in my life to that point. And I ate a full steak of alligator. Okay. Um, anyway, I hated every bite of it. I was like trying not to gag. It was horrible. People ask me what it tastes like. Today I would tell you that it's like a tasteless chicken, but tougher. It felt like I was chewing gum. Like it would never go away. And maybe it's because, I had never eaten meat before. But you personally have to decide how far you go. I considered myself very, very fortunate in Africa that we were among Muslims, which means they never offered me, I shouldn't say never because they ate shrimp, but it was extremely rare that they offered us anything that we couldn't eat. So the Muslim clean foods and the biblical clean foods are pretty much the same. Um, and so I never had an issue in Africa with them offering me something to eat. But this is something, guys, that you will have to figure out. And you need to figure out ahead of time what you're willing to eat, what you're not, and what is the acceptable excuse. Okay? So most cultures can understand if you say, "I cannot eat something for religious reasons." Okay? Not every culture is going to understand that. And a culture that is more Western, more atheistic, and I would venture most of Europe and North America, I would almost even venture Central and South America, although they might understand a little bit more about religious reasons and not eating something. But you need to figure out what their reactions would be if you give a religious reason. And you should never try to elaborate. You should tell your host ahead of time. But all of this, I mean, this is super sensitive things, guys, when it comes to foods. Because you very, very quickly alienate your host if you will not eat what they put in front of you. So allergies is another thing. So I'm allergic to mushrooms and apparently allergic to something else because last week I ate something. I was out with my daughter and my lip swelled up in the matter of 15 minutes. It swelled up huge. My tongue was tingly and numb. And I had hives all over my neck, my arms, the backs of my arms, and my legs. I broke out just like that in hives, and I'm kind of concerned because I was having toast with avocado. I've always had toast and avocado. So I don't know what else was in that food, but I am allergic to mushrooms. And when I went to France, I was very embarrassed to tell them that I was allergic to food. And so they would put the food in front of me and I would eat it, regardless of my allergy. And with mushrooms, I just get gastrointestinal severe disorder very fast, and it lasts for days. So it just really, really messes up my system. And with age, it's gotten worse and worse. But um, I can tell you the 7 times I ate mushrooms in France. I can describe to you every single time and how sick I got. And the worst one was on my 21st birthday. I was invited to a teacher's house, and the salad had fresh mushrooms in it, and the rice, the main dish, had a mushroom sauce on it. And so I just ate it. And I got so sick, I could not go back to the dormitory. And so at that point, I had to learn that it was better for me to be able to say, very quietly, respectfully, I'm sorry, but I am allergic to X. And so I've learned to say that when I'm being invited to someone's house, and say, um, you know, to this day, it's hard for me. And I think it's hard because my parents imposed, I felt like my parents imposed their vegetarianism in Brazil on people, and I had to follow suit. And I felt it was embarrassing and insulting. And so I've always had a very strong reaction to saying no to food because of that. Um, but I've learned that it is even worse for you to have an allergic reaction at someone's house and then they feel terrible. So anyway, when I simply don't want to deal with things, I can say, I have certain allergies, and so I want you to know that I cannot eat XYZ. But these are areas that you really need to pay attention to. You might want to take a picture of this. These are some websites that I found really interesting. This one, even though it's super old and not all the links work, there's some pretty nice links about learning the world of learning cultures. This one, Guide to Culture Crossing. This one has a list of culture blogs, and you can go through and look at their list. And website Countries of the World, same thing. I've chosen some of these to show you. Oh my. Yeah, I tried that browser and it didn't work. Okay, so I need to share this. Share screen again. Here we go. So this is a website that has colors in cultures. So there are numbers, okay, and layers. So here you have ABC all the way to J, okay, and then you have numbers around. So the numbers, a little complex to understand this, but so A is Western American, B is Japanese, C is Hindu, D is Native American, E is Chinese, F is Asian, G is Eastern European, H is Arab, I is African, and J is South American. Okay, so let's say the color of anger. Okay, so in Western America, Japan, Eastern Europe, and Africa, red is the color of anger. But if you look at C, in Hindu, it is black. So you may want to avoid black as an illustration in Hindu culture. Bad luck. Bad luck is important, right? We don't want to give a gift in the colors of bad luck. So that's 4. And B, so in Japanese culture, black is the color of bad luck. Okay. I thought there would be more colors here. So you can get a picture, right, of how these are playing out. And because these colors are very similar, they gave you a little key here for like this is silver, this is gray, yellow, and gold. Okay. The rest of the colors are pretty self-explanatory. So you might want to explore this a little bit, this website. This website here I really liked. It's very basic, but it can give you a very quick starting point, okay? This is guideculturecrossings.net, and it is a community-built resource, so it's not scientific in nature, and yet it will give you a lot of information. So you can select your country. Let's say you're traveling to Namibia. Okay, so it's the Middle East and Africa. The government is a republic. The language is, the official language is English, but only 7% of people speak English. It's going to be your top educated people. Afrikaans is a common language that most of the people, 60% of the white population, speak. German is 32%, and indigenous languages 1%. The major religions are Christian, Lutheran is about 50%, and then 10 to 20% are indigenous beliefs. Major ethnic groups. And let's see, greetings, communication styles, personal space and touching, eye contact, views of time, gender issues, gestures, taboos, law and order, videos and other stuff. Business, you've got dress, titles, meetings, negotiations, gift giving, and miscellaneous. And then if you're students, okay? So let's go to business dress. For men, collared shirts, pants, and tie are acceptable in most situations. Clean dress shoes are appreciated as well. For women, skirt, dress, or dress pants, clean dress top, clean shoes, usually dressy sandals or high heels. Avoid clothes that are too revealing or tight-fitting. Although Namibians do not tend to wear casual sandals to work or to do business, most foreign volunteers do, and Namibians are used to this and usually considered acceptable. So let me explain that. American tourists and American business people, when we go to Africa, we tend to dress like we're on safari. Don't know where that comes from, but we have this image, and we show up wearing sandals. They do not wear sandals unless they are in their courtyard throughout majority of Africa. So guys, wear nice shoes. Men invest in Africa, men invest in their shoes, okay? And women wear the most uncomfortable heels you can imagine. Um, but you can get away with low, dressy sandals, okay, as long as they look really nice and dressy. Usually not your typical little leather summer sandals, okay? Um, Titles and business cards is best to address people using their professional title of Mr. and Mrs. and their last name. People are often referred to using their surname only. So Pichot, okay, not saying Mrs. Pichot. And that is acceptable in most cases. If you don't know the person's name, you should say sir or ma'am or something like that in the local language. In Afrikaans, which is spoken throughout southern 2/3 of the country, sir is meneer and ma'am is my fru. You'd have to check on that pronunciation, okay? Avoid using first names until being invited to do so. Director or a person's title is often used for people of high posts. So remember that power distance? It looks like it's very alive and well in Namibia. So you want to live within that high power distance. There's no set protocol in giving or receiving business cards, but always use your right hand. So anyway, that gives you an idea of navigating that. And then this website, the best 50 culture blogs and websites to follow. This first one, Eurozine magazine for understanding Europe, is, it's a long-standing, well respected. The World Fact Book by the Central Intelligence Agency has a ton of information on different countries. It's a must go to, especially for Americans. And then Comiseo, I don't know how you say that, Global. They have a lot of guides as well. So let's say Bolivia, and they're going to give you some main themes, okay? Family classes, etiquette, gift giving, dining, tipping, meetings and greetings, business cards, meetings, okay? So anyway, those are excellent sources, and although they're not your scholastic sources, if you use these on your website or in your paper, I will find them acceptable. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful to you as a quick guide.